In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create a very simple but very efficient filter component in React. If you don't know, a filter component is essentially a custom component that allows you to filter some data in your application. Say, for example, that you were displaying a list of products, you would maybe want to filter them by category, by price, or even just allow searching for the product. In most cases, you would create a custom component for it, and you would have that component affect the actual list of data, the list of products that you're seeing on the screen. That's what we're going to be doing today. But before we get into that, if you want to learn how to build a big and complex application with React as a total beginner with literally no prior experience required, check out Project React. It'll be linked in the description. I promise you, you will not regret it. Let's get into it. All right, let's begin. So in front of us, we have a simple application with some code already set up for us so that we can begin working and creating our custom filter component. So in front of us, we have here a list of products. That's all that this application is doing. It's currently just showing us a list of the products that we have available for this application. Each product has a name here. So right, this is the name. It also has a price and it also has a category. This is the category over here. And we're going to be using these values to actually allow filtering of these products based on those variables. We're going to allow filtering by the name by including a search so we can search for the name. We're going to allow filtering by the price by setting a max price property on our actual filters to only show products that are below that price. And we're also going to allow selecting a category to be able to only show products of that specific category. This is what the code for the application currently looks like. So what we have here is we have the app component that we were just looking at. This component is getting its data from React Query. So we are using React Query in this project, which is typical to what you would expect from a React project. We're calling here the fetch products function, which is coming from our API folder. We're passing here products as the query key, and then based on the data, we're using the data over here. And if we have data, we're rendering the product list component. And if we don't have data, and if we're fetching, we're loading just a simple paragraph that says loading. If we open up here the product list component, this component is super simple. All it does is it just receives an array of products over here as its props. And then based off of those products, it'll just map over each one of them and render some UI for the actual products. Then if we take a look here at the fetch products function, this one comes from API/products, and this is essentially mimicking a backend because for this simple example video, we actually don't have a backend. This fetch products function optionally accepts here this options parameter, which can have category, max price, and search, right? So these are going to be used, as you can see here, to actually filter through the options, right? And what comes out here is you have filtered products, which initially gets set to this product over here, which comes from data products. This is just a static list of products that we kind of are using as our database, right? So each product has an ID, name, category, price, and image, and that is the correct type of the product over here. This is our type. So this is what we're going to be working with. So now let's go back to the app component and let's start thinking about what we actually want to do here. But before we get into that, I do want to take a moment and just briefly talk about Brilliant, which is the sponsor of this week's video, because what they're doing is very closely aligned to what we're doing in this video, and that is something that is called learning by doing. So Brilliant, just like this video, is also a place where you do learning by doing. They have thousands of interactive lessons in various topics like math, data analytics, AI, and also more importantly for us, programming. Brilliant's platform is uniquely effective. Each lesson that you do on there has you solve problems using a hands-on approach, so you're actually doing things and actually getting a feel for them, which has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching traditional tutorials or lecture videos. Brilliant also helps you build your critical skills, which is super important as a programmer, and you're doing that through problem solving instead of memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge using Brilliant on specific topics, you're also going to learn to become a better thinker. And Brilliant does all of that with literally just a couple of minutes a day. You have fun lessons that you can do at any point in time where you have some time, and it's literally the opposite of mindless scrolling, and it builds a great habit. They have some great courses that you can check out, and one that I would personally recommend is Thinking in Code, which actually follows the same methodology that we're doing inside of this video. It actually is going to teach you solid foundations for computer science, which is going to directly help you as a React developer. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/causeandsolutions or click the first link in the description. You're also going to get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you once again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to building our custom filter component. So let's take a moment now to think about how can we efficiently solve this problem, right? Because what we want to do is we want to add filtering capabilities to what we already have over here, right? So we have to work with the existing code that we have, make some minor changes here and there, and essentially add custom filter functionality to this component. component? Well, the first thing that makes sense for us to do is to think about how we would provide the filters to our fetch products function. Because remember, if you go here to its definition, this fetch products function optionally accepts here the product filters, which will have category, max price, and search, right? And these are things that we're going to have to manage to actually be able to filter. So we need a way to pass those to this fetch products function. This means that our filters have to live inside of this app component, right? Because the only way that we're going to be able to pass those filters is if we have them here in the app component and then we're passing them directly to this function so that when it gets called, it actually uses the filters to filter our data. So that's step one. But because on this channel, we're always trying to be senior developers and always trying to apply best practices, we're not going to put all of that state and all of that code to manage the filters inside of the app component. We're instead going to create a new custom component just for the filters, and we're going to do all of that code and logic inside of that component. But because that component, even though it is handling its own logic for the filtering and all of that, still has to send that data, send the data of the filters, what category are we currently on, what's the max price that we're currently on, we have to send that back to this component, the app component, because remember, it has to go inside of this function here through the app component, right? So we're going to need to create a custom component, put some logic in there to handle all the filters, and then add a callback to that component that we can pass from the app component. And then when we have new filters, we call the callback, we get those filters, and then we send them here to React Query, and React Query is going to do everything through the function here, which takes those options and then just filters the products based on those actual options. Cool, so we have our plan, we know what to do, now it's time to actually go and do it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and actually create the new custom component. And this one, I'm going to put it inside of components and then inside a products list. And here we're going to call this one product list filters.tsx. Now, the reason why I'm putting this inside of product list and not just directly inside of the root component folder is because this is the product list filters. It should only apply technically to the product list, right? If ever in the future this should apply to something else that needs to be shared, we can easily pull it out into its own folder. But for now, this makes sense. And then at the top, we're going to do our JSFC. That is going to create a component for us. We're going to do a product list filters like this, and here we're just going to return nothing for now. We're going to complete that later. Now, as we said, we need here to manage all of the logic related to the filters. That's one thing, but also we need to actually have a callback from the app component to be able to send those filters up. So that means that we need to define props for this component and have it receive a callback. So we're going to come here, we're going to do type product list filter props, filters props like this. That is going to be equal. And now what we want to do here is we want to have our callback, right? So we're going to call this one on change just to make it a bit simpler. And then here Copilot is being very helpful. It already knows what I want to do. We're going to put filters and then product filters. And this we are going to import from API/products. Remember, this is here, this is this type here. These are the actual filters. That's what gets used inside of the fetch products function. So we can import them and then have an onChange function that will call with those filters from this component. Then we can come here, we can define some props on change, and then we can have this here product list filter props. And there we go. Now our component supports an onChange function and we can use it to call it from the parent. Then what we need to do is we actually need to start implementing the logic for actually having our filters. And we're going to proceed one step at a time just to keep things simple. So going back here to our products, right? Each product has a name, has a category, has a price. We're going to first start with the name. We're going to have just a simple search input that you can type into. And based off of what you type, it is going to return only the products that have what you've typed in their name. Simple enough. So we're going to go back here to product list filters. And now we're going to want to create a state variable to keep track of that search, right? What are we searching for? So we're going to come here and do const search set search, and that is going to be equal to use state. And here we're going to import this from React. And then what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit clear as to what we're actually putting inside of the state variable, I'm going to give it here a type. And this type is going to be, let me just type it correctly, is going to be product filters. And here we're going to do search like so. And now we're going to define this. There we go. Now we've actually given this state variable the explicit type of product filters and then search, which if we go back here, that is going to be a string, but also importantly, it's an optional string, which means that it can be undefined. We're doing this to make life a little bit simpler so that if we ever need to change the products filters over here, all of our components are going to throw errors if we made something that is an incompatible change. Then the next step for us to do is to actually come here and write an input to have our UI to actually actually connect this state variable to some actual element that we can use to type on. So that is going to be a simple text input. So we're going to come here, we're going to do input type text, and then value that is going to be search, right? And then on change, we're going to have this take in the E, and then let's see, can Copilot help us complete this? There we go. We're going to set the search to whatever value that has. And then maybe as a placeholder, we can put something like search products, ... right? Now we have this input, we've given it search as its value, so we've connected it to our state variable. And then whenever this input changes, it is going to update this search variable here. Great. So now with this, we can actually come, even though our component is not fully complete yet, we can come and directly put it inside of the app component over here. We can do product list filters, import this like this. This is going to give us an error that we haven't provided the onChange function. That's fine. We're going to provide it later, but because this is just a type error, this is actually going to work. So if you come back here to our actual UI, we have our search input over here, which we can type on, and we can say product 1. Now, obviously, nothing is going to happen because we haven't configured this to actually do anything, but our search input is fully working, and at least we have that set up. So now the next step for us to do is to actually handle the onChange function over here. So essentially, what we want to do is whenever we have a change in these filters over here, we want to call the onChange function with the updated value of those filters and then send that to the parent, and then the parent can take care of that and it can send it to React Query. So that's the first step. Let's do that. And for this, we're actually going to use the simple old use effect, which is a great use case for something like this. So I'm going to come here and do use effect, import this from React. Then we're going to give this here a function. We're going to give here a dependency array. I'm going to put search for now, but we're going to change that in just a moment. And then what we're going to do is on change, and we're going to call this with search. And there we go. We have no type errors because all of the other properties over here are optional, so that we can call this with just search and it is going to work. So now with this, every time that we type on the search, every time that we change the search, this onChange function is going to get called. It's going to update this state variable with that new search. That is going to trigger this use effect, and it's going to come here, and then we're going to be able to access that new value inside of this component. But before we do that, I want to caution you not to do things like this directly, because this is imperformant. This is inefficient. Essentially, what we're doing here, once we fully connected everything, we're going to take this search variable and we're going to send it here directly to use query, to React Query, which is going to trigger a fetch. Remember, this fetch products function over here actually waits for 1 second, right? So there is a delay. It is simulating a backend. Again, it's not a real backend, it's simulating one, but it's still simulating and it still has a delay. And that's a problem. Because with the code that we currently have, every single time that we type something on an input, every single keystroke, which again, think of you when you're typing something, you type a lot faster than 1 keystroke every second, we're going to be calling this onChange function over here, and we're going to update and call this fetch product with a new search value. This is inefficient. You don't want to trigger a backend request, even if it's simulated on every single keystroke. You want to delay it. And for that, there actually is a really useful custom hook that we have here called use debounce, which is going to effectively take any value and then it's going to delay updating that value and only make this debounce value change once, at most once every whatever delay you put here. It's defaulted to 500 milliseconds. If this is unfamiliar to you, I actually have a whole tutorial video specifically on the use debounce hook that you can go and look to see why this makes sense and why we want to use it. But here in our case, this is a perfect use case and we're going to use it to debounce our search property. So we're going to close this hook over here, and now we're going to come back here to product list filters, and right below search, we're going to do const debounced search, and that is going to equal to use debounce. We're going to have to import this directly from our custom hooks folder. And here we actually don't have to provide 500 because that is the default value. We're just going to use it like this. And now we have this debounce search, which is only going to update at most once every 500 milliseconds that we can use instead of this search here in this dependency array. So instead of this, we can do debounce search. And here we're going to put search and then debounce search like this. What this is now going to do is no matter how the user is actually typing, right, it is still going to update this input. So the application is still going to be very responsive. What we're not doing, however, is we're not calling the onChange function, which in turn is not going to call a new fetch request every single time that the user types. And instead, we're using this debounce search value over here, which is going to be delayed. It's going to delay the update by 500 milliseconds. And only after that do we call this use effect. So that means that the user is going to type. We're not going to send anything when the user has finished typing and then 500 milliseconds have elapsed since then. We're then going to call this onChange function. This use effect is going to run, and then the new fetch request is going to happen. This is a performance optimization, and you want to do this whenever you have inputs that users can type on that trigger fetch requests in the backend. And then once we have this component is pretty much done, at least in terms of the search. So now we can come here to the app component, and what we have to do is we have to provide here an onChange function to this component, get those values, have them here inside of the app component, and then just pass them to this fetch products function, and that's it. The fetch products function is going to handle everything else along with React Query. So in this case, what we can do is we can actually define an inline function just because it's a super simple one. So we can do onChange like this, that we can access the filters directly over here. And now with these filters, we have access to them over here and we can do something with them. Now, to be able to pass them here to the fetch products function, we have multiple ways that we can do things. I'm going to show you a simple way, which is to just create another state variable inside of the app component for the search and then pass that here to this fetch products function. So let's come here, let's do const and then search, set search. That is going to be equal to use state, and Copilot already knows what I want, at least it did. We're going to do product filters, and then we're going to pass it here the search like this, and we're going to default this to undefined, and there we go. Now on this filters over here, we're going to do set search and then filters.search. Remember, filters over here has all of these properties over here, has category, max price, and search, right? So we're using those, and then we're setting the search over here, which now we have access to this component inside of the app component. Sorry, we have access to the search inside of the app component. And then the last thing for us to do is to come here and then pass an object to fetch products. So we're going to pass an object, and we're going to pass the search over here like this. And now this search is going to get sent to our actual fetch request over here. And because we're using React Query and we want to work with its caching capabilities, we should also pass the search inside of an object as the query key, so that all of the cache magic that React Query does actually works with our search as well. And now with this, if we actually go back to our application, we still have the same input, but now I can type something. I can put test, and you see it's going to trigger a new fetch request. And now we actually have nothing over here, right? Because we have no products that actually match this test query. But notice that as long as I'm typing, right, nothing is happening. But as soon as I stop typing, for example, I can just remove this, or even you saw it now, as soon as I do something, it's going to wait 500 milliseconds before actually triggering a fetch request, right? Again, let me type here. I can type, nothing is happening. As soon as I stop, now it's going to trigger the loading, and then it's going to actually trigger a fetch request. That is because we're using this debounce over here, which is going to delay the updating of the search until 500 milliseconds have elapsed since the last time that it was changed. That's what this hook does. And also, because we've passed everything correctly to React Query in terms of the cache, if I go to something that I've already searched before, like this empty here, we don't even get to see a loading because it already has this data in the cache. If I do something like product 1, it's going to show loading for a second, but then if I delete something and then retype the 1, notice that it doesn't show any loading. I mean, it actually does show it here because that was a background fetch. Ignore that. This means that the React Query cache is actually working correctly, and it's taking into account our search, right? So we're working correctly with React Query exactly in the way that we're supposed to. Great. And with this, we're actually pretty much done. The only thing left for us to do is to come here and add the missing filters. That is one for category, and that is one for max price. So let's do those quickly, because really it's nothing new. It's just more of the same that we've already done. So I'm going to come here and do const and then category, set category. That is going to be equal to, let's see, Copilot, there we go, use state, product filters, category this time. And then we're going to do the same thing with max price. There we go, Copilot knows. We're going to set another one for max price. Then in this case, we're going to pass here category to our dependency array over here. I'm also going to pass max price as well, because those should be there. And then I'm going to pass here category. And then we're going to pass here, let's see, max price. There we go, max price. Now, whenever any of these changes, we're calling this use effect over here, and we're setting the same filters back to the same component. Again, it's just more of the same. And then we need to come here to our JSX and actually make the updates to make use of those values. And what I'm going to do, just to save a little bit of time, is I just have some UI that has already been created. I'm just going to copy and paste it here and just quickly walk you through what I've actually done. So the input over here is essentially the same. I haven't changed anything. I just added one select field over here for the category. So we're passing category over here. And then on change, we're actually setting the category. And then I just have some options here, first, second, and third for our actual categories. And I'm doing something very simple similar with the max price. Again, another select input, and then putting here some values for the actual max price. Nothing too fancy. And now with this, we're actually done once again with this component, and this time we're fully done. We did all of our filter properties that we could use, and now we have to come back here to our app component and just create some new state variables. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy these because these are going to be the same. We're going to put them here at the top, and then we're going to come here and then set filters. We're going to do set category and pass it here filters.category, and then set max price and then pass it filters.max price. And finally, we're going to do category here, max price here, and then the same category here, and then max price here. And now everything should work exactly as we expect. So now if we go back to our application, this actually looks a little bit better. And that is because of this div over here that I added when I copied. This just essentially aligns things on a flex row property and then sets a gap. That's all that it does. But as you can see, it makes a lot of difference, right? So we can still search for products. We can still do product one, and this is still going to work exactly as we had it before. But now, as you can see here, both of these are categories, but one has 100 and then one has 1000 as a price. So perhaps if we put 500, you're going to see that we have loading and only the product that has under 500 is actually showing up. So this is working. If I remove here the actual text and maybe see all we have is products that are under 500, but now if I want to set here the second category, we're going to see only products that are under $500 that also have the second category. Our filters are working exactly as we expect. And this is great because the code that we wrote to actually make that happen is not that complicated. We just created one extra component, which was right for us to do. This is the efficient way to do it. We've had it have all of the code, all of the state variables that it needs to actually do its job, right? The use effect here included. And then we have some simple UI to actually manipulate those values. And then whenever those values change, we're calling the onChange function over here. We're sending that to the parent, and then the parent can take over from there. And then the parent over here, it just receives via this onChange function over here, it receives the actual filters, it stores it in its own state, and then it passes them to React Query on the query key so that we get all of the caching magic to work. And then it also passes it to the fetch products function, and then the fetch products function is going to take it from there and do all of the fetching, and that is going to get piped over here in this data property, and automatically we render the products list component over here to show our filtered products. This is great, this is efficient, and honestly, it's very simple. And this is honestly how your React applications should look like. You should have a bunch of these components that are isolated, that do only one thing, right? This is only for the filters, and then you're delegating everything else. This filter doesn't filter the actual data of the products, it just handles the local state of the filters. The app component, while it does hold all of the code to actually show and display the actual products, doesn't make the actual fetch, right? It's deferred to React Query, and React Query does its thing. And then we have this fetch products function, which actually filters the products from this static list of products, which again is simulating a backend, right? Everything has its own responsibility, everything is delegated, and you've essentially made a chain of products, a chain of things, of components that are working nicely together to produce the results that you want in your application. This is how you should always build with React, and hopefully this is what I am able to teach in my videos. And if you want to take this further, you can actually access this code. I've created a repository for it. It'll be linked in the description below. It's on GitHub. Take it and build upon it and really try to understand this. There's a lot of things here that you can improve, things that I haven't done, even things that maybe are not really correct the way that they currently are now. For example, if you look here, whenever we refresh, we're defaulting to the first category, right? So we're only going to see products. I mean, this is actually a bug, right? We have first category over here, but we're seeing products of the second and third categories. So that is a bug that you can actually go and fix. You can clone the repository, make the fix, and see if you can figure it out. That is going to be a great way to learn, and I highly encourage you to do so if you have the time. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Kozden. This is Kozden Solutions. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Brilliant once again for sponsoring this video, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.